this UN leader, this world leader. She says that Hamas, these terrorist attacks, are not anti-Semitic. And so I confronted her. She turned the attack on me. She questioned my humanity for challenging this so-called world leader for being such an overt anti-Semite.
This is Bishop Robert Stearns. I'm here on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. The Mount of Olives is just behind me. And Solidarity Sunday 2025 was an incredible coming together of Jews and Christians standing in solidarity together, declaring never again. I want to invite you to join me as you hear the speeches, the testimony, the witness firsthand of Jewish leaders who are standing strong and proud in the midst of attack, in the midst of this rising anti-Semitism. They are raising their voices, and we are forming a wall of protection around them. Join me as you hear their amazing stories.
So I have the pleasure of introducing Max Meyer. He is an awesome young man, sophomore at Princeton University, and he's a political science major. Is that correct? Yeah, with aspirations to go into some form of law. Is that correct when you're finished? I'll say this, that, and I've said it before already, I just want to imprint you with this today. There's a tremendous destiny on his life, tremendous call on his life. 20 years old, here he is. He's been on a couple of news stations already, has shared, and has become a great leader at Princeton University and advocating for the Jewish students there and some of the things that they're experiencing. There's three objectives we have. First one is to foster an awareness and understanding of what is happening in the Jewish community right now. There's so much taking place. I know for some of us, we just see clips on the news, we see different things going on, but we don't really understand the impact and what is and how it's affecting those in the Jewish community. The second thing that we want to do is we want to promote solidarity in our shared values as Jews and Christians. Again, to say again that we have more in common than we have difference. And then lastly, encourage some practical steps of what we can do to actually stand in the face of this hatred. Of course, we know we can pray. Amen. But prayer must be coupled with action. All right, you don't just see people praying in the Bible. You see people praying and then God activating them to actually do something that makes a difference and a change to make the world more of what God intends it to be. So we wouldn't just hear from you today, Max. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your studies at Princeton and what you're involved in and like what it means for you to be Jewish personally? Because I know that there's a range of how people interact with their faith within the Jewish community. So you could speak a little bit to that as well.
First of all, I just want to thank you, Pastor George, for having me, for doing this incredible event, for working with all these great organizations with Eagles Wings, Moral Hearts Alliance, and all of those organizations working around the country to make this happen. And to all of you for being here, for being such incredible allies, and for being willing to hear me speak. And to develop this alliance between our two communities. I study at Princeton. I had never really had that much experience with anti-Semitism. New York is a very Jewish place. I had never had that much experience with anti-Semitism before October 7th, before I went to college. And October 7th seemed to unleash this sleeping giant of anti-Semitism that perhaps had never gone away, but hadn't manifested itself to the significant extent that it has in the last year and a half or so. So my connection to my Judaism, I'm not super religious. There are, of course, different extents to how religious people are. And my connection to Judaism often manifests itself through support for Israel and connection to Israel. It's where half of the world's Jewish people live. And so when Israel is under attack, I feel that Judaism is under attack. I feel that I'm under attack. I feel that we all, as Americans, are under attack. And so that my faith has governed my desire to get involved in all of this activism.
Come on. And you're a part of a group now at Princeton too that is actively doing that. Is that right?
Yeah, I run a group called Princeton Tigers for Israel, and we work. It's not just Jewish students. In fact, one of the things that's so inspiring about this and so inspiring about the group that I run is one of my the top deputies in my organization is a Christian kid from Alabama. He understands that our fights are intertwined.
Yeah.
That the fight for Israel and against anti-Semitism on college campuses, off college campuses, is important for us all to engage in. So this is not just a Jewish fight.
When I was in Israel just a few months back, I know October 7th was, in many respects, a major wake-up call for younger and older in Israel. And in light of that, how has this propelled you even more into the work that you're doing? And how do you see it impacting the Jewish community at large? And do you feel like it's deepened your faith in some ways because of what's taken place?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I often say whenever I'm doing these sorts of speaking engagements or whenever I'm doing any sort of activism or advocacy, I say, I had no intention of being an activist or an advocate. I didn't go to college as an activist. I was telling Pastor George the other day. But when I saw the reaction to October 7th, I mean, this is a horrible day, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Not just Jews were killed, plenty of Christians were killed, Arabs were killed, taken hostage, all religions, all genders, all ages. Women were raped, babies were mutilated and put in ovens. I mean, it's stuff that we couldn't even begin to fathom. And within 2 days, on all of our most elite, so-called elite college campuses and in all of our nation's cities, we saw these protests celebrating those acts as some sort of resistance, as though it can possibly be complicated when we're talking about the rape of women. There's no two sides to that sort of quote-unquote resistance. It's just horrible. And I didn't see enough or really any sufficient counter advocacy on my campus in college. And so it propelled me to get involved. I was only a freshman. I was not a leader by any stretch in any student organization or among the campus community. But over time, I just happened into that role. I call myself an accidental advocate. And by the time all of these encampments that we saw in the news started popping up, it just developed into a leader. And it has most certainly deepened my faith, to get to the second part of your question. It's deepened my connection to my fellow Jews. I see my faith first and foremost as a community, as a community of people who share the same values, who share similar values. And I see that as, like you've been saying, that's not so, the Christians and Jews in that respect, we're really not so different. In fact, we share a whole lot more than we don't.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we can all be in this room and we can all agree and understand that we must combat this discrimination, all forms of discrimination. Today it's against us. Maybe at some point it'll be against other groups, and we'll all still stand together. And it's just very important.
But when the hour calls, it's like what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, that silence in the face of evil is evil itself. And I feel like, Max, so many, they're not quite sure, where do I engage? What's the most appropriate thing for me to do? So, with your advocacy group, which I'm interested to hear more about, I think we're interested to hear more about, what do you guys do practically that has helped be a voice and also a sense of hope and empowerment for those who are feeling like, they've been oppressed, or they're feeling like nobody's with us?
Universities often bring leaders, American leaders, world leaders, to speak as part of speaker series and whatnot. And so just this past fall, the president of the Maldives was invited to speak on a leadership series at our public policy school, which is the supposedly the best school at Princeton. And the Maldives, for those of you who don't know, instituted a ban in the aftermath of October 7th on Israeli passport holders from entering the country. And then they reversed that ban a couple weeks later to tailor it more narrow, in a more narrow fashion, to only ban Jewish Israeli passport holders from entering the country, because they realize that there are plenty of Arab Israelis who enjoy equal protection under the law and voting rights. And so I was appalled that was somebody invited to speak, that was someone invited to speak on a leadership series, which of course it confers a level of distinction and prestige onto the person who receives that platform. And so my organization, we wrote a letter. We put everything on social media. Social media is ground zero for hate and also for advocacy. And so we put our letter on social media, and we ended up getting meetings out of that. And we worked with the organizations, and eventually I was allowed to ask a question at the event in order to present the other side of the other perspective, and to challenge the president of this country for instituting a ban that was just so plainly bigoted. And I confronted him, and that video ended up going viral, which is very important. All social media has made activism a lot easier in many respects, because so many of these videos can go viral when the hate or just the abhorrent nature of what's said is so obvious. And he defended the ban. He turned it on me, and the crowd at Princeton, supposedly these celebrated students, this great achievement of going to Princeton, which is a little ridiculous that we celebrate that in that respect. These students all stand up. They give a standing ovation for his defense of banning only Jewish Israeli passport holders from entering his country. And there are so many examples that I could give. A top UN official came to Princeton in late October, and the UN as an organization has worked almost single-handedly to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. But this UN leader, this world leader, has said all of these horribly anti-Semitic things. She says that Hamas is terrorist attacks are not anti-Semitic. She says that the Jews are, all of these ancient stereotypes, Jews are controlling the media and the politicians and this and that. And so I confronted her, and she's compared Israeli leaders to Hitler. Instead of, apologizing or taking back some of these words, she turned the attack on me. She questioned my humanity for challenging this so-called world leader for being such an overt anti-Semite. And these are the types of things that my organization works deeply to combat. And there are so many other examples, not the least of which are the encampments, which I know everybody saw on TV in the spring, and the direct threats that student leaders like me have received on account of our activism. I mean, nobody should be. It intimidates you into silence for the most part. If you receive a death threat, as I have, for speaking out. So it's very important that the organization continue to fight, but also that we know that we have so many allies like we do here.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I'll say it's even hard to conceive how these kinds of things are happening at the intellectual capitals, if you will, of our nation, that are shaping the thinking and the mindsets of this generation that's being raised up right now. Do you feel like the work that you're doing is making an impact in that regard of helping to shift the narrative? Because I feel like that's a lot of what's happening through the news. That's a lot of what's taking place on social media. There's a certain narrative that's being spun, and people are making it seem as if, first of all, Israel is the aggressor, which they are not. Do you know the name of the Israeli army is the IDF? All right, that is the Israeli Defense Force. They are not actively seeking war with Palestine. They are defending themselves from people who have committed to essentially eradicating Israel from the map. But there's this spin as if, Israel is the aggressor in this scenario. Do you feel like you're making an impact? Secondly, are there students who you've seen have their minds changed as you've engaged them in conversation, or is it more just two ships passing at night? Like there's no real dialogue that's taking place on your campus?
So, I mean, I certainly hope that the work that we're doing is making an impact. And I think it does. I think that on campus, and I think there are two different battles that we're fighting. One is on campus, one is off campus. And the off-campus fight, I certainly think we're making a difference because when the examples that I just shared, when those videos go viral, or if I wrote a column in the New York Post a couple weeks ago, and I was only able to do that because of the platform that I have on account of this organization. I think that when we're able to engage in that sort of advocacy, and we're able to get eyeballs on this information, and have people understand that, for example, there was an article in the school newspaper right before the winter recess, and they asked students, it was about the state of dialogue, or the lack of dialogue on campus specifically, surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the one student on the other side, they asked me whether I would be willing to sit down with a pro-Palestinian student. I said, absolutely. I would love nothing more than the chance to be able to share my perspective, to hear their perspective, to engage each other in this dialogue, to understand where we're coming from. And the response of the anti-Israel student to the newspaper was, you don't go around asking oppressed people to speak to their oppressors. And to insinuate that Jewish students are oppressing anyone, much less our anti-Israel counterparts, is ludicrous in itself. And we've all seen that just from the news alone. But it also plays into this dynamic of how so many students view the world. Everything is, there's an oppressor and there's an oppressed. It's like an ancient Marxist theory. And it doesn't just extend to the Jewish issue or to Israel, but it extends to so many other issues. Recently, that article I wrote was about how my experience with anti-Semitism has colored my understanding of the murder of the CEO in New York City, when this Ivy League graduate murdered this CEO on the streets of the city where I'm from, just a few blocks from where I live. And what I said was, the reason why so many young people are sympathizing with the murderer, who is a vigilante, took justice into his own hands, whether or not you think that you have qualms with the healthcare industry, which could be very reasonable, to kill someone is not the answer. And the reason so many young people are standing by this murderer is because they have this warped worldview where everything is oppressed or oppressed, and they can't seem to identify which is which. And so doing this advocacy, I think, is making a difference. And I think that among, we could say, undecideds or people who don't have enough information, I think that we are making a difference. But when it comes to the radicals on the other side, they're just not willing to even engage us in dialogue because they identify us as oppressors for whatever reason.
Yeah, so it's almost like they want a solution, but then they don't want a solution. They want to pretend like there's dialogue, but there's not actually any dialogue happening. Is that one of the aims that you have with your group? Do you guys want to see more of that on your campus?
Absolutely. We all talk about the great issues of polarization in our time, in our society, not just on college campuses or around the Israel-Hamas war, but the solution to that polarization, or to this siloization, is to have conversation. It's to have open dialogue. We have to be able to have respectful dialogues with one another. And if we can't have respectful dialogues with one another, then we'll never be able to have empathy with those who aren't the same as we are. And so, of course, I want nothing more than to be able to have these conversations. Hope to impart my perspective on those who don't see my perspective because maybe they're getting all their information from social media, or maybe they're getting all their information from their friends or these radical professors, and they don't understand the lived experience of those who are fighting against this hate, but also to try to bring people together.
That's good. That's good. I think you said something really powerful when we spoke on Thursday. I feel like sometimes when we look at what's going on in Israel, when we look at what's happening in the Jewish community, we go, that's their fight or that's Israel's fight. But just to give you some perspective, Israel is the only democratic state in the Middle East, the only one. There are about 31 Muslim nations. There's only one Jewish state, okay? And it's no bigger than New Jersey, maybe just a little bit bigger than New Jersey. So to talk about oppression, to talk about what's actually happening there, it should help frame it in a way where, like, maybe there's something going on that we're not quite really getting. Why is the news pushing the narrative the way that they are? And I want us to think about it like this, okay? You said something along the lines of, it's not just Jewish hatred, it's not just anti-Semitism, it is hatred against the West, and the undermining of the very foundations of our Western society. Could you just speak a little bit more to that again? I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's fight is not just Israel's fight. Israel's fight is the fight of the United States. It's the fight of the West. And I don't mean like on the ground fighters. I mean the higher level, like the moral fight, the fight for values, for Western values. And those who stand against Israel, those who contribute to this proliferation of anti-Semitism in our country and on our college campuses, stand no less with, or no more, no less against the United States. They stand no less against the West than they do against Israel. And Israel and the Jewish people, as has long been the case, are simply the first line of defense, or the easiest first target. There aren't that many of us. Israel's the size of New Jersey. Only, a couple million people in the whole nation. And so when we talk about standing up to anti-Semitism, when we talk about defending Israel, we talk about defending our very own values, our shared values. If you look at the people who are protesting against Jews and against Israel, many of them feel that Christians and Jews and all who worship, whoever you worship, but all who worship are committing some sort of sin. And the United States and our free values are under attack by these very people, and the ability to practice all of our religions freely are under attack by these same people. And so that's part of the reason why it's so important that we all stand together in this fight, because our fight is your fight, and your fight would be our fight too.
Come on. Woo! I hope you're feeling empowered right now. We've seen a match made in hell, is what I'll call it. This unholy union between liberal woke leftism and radical Islam is something that we would have never conceived of. And what I'll say is this, that the only union that I believe in this world that could stand against that is a holy union between Christians and Jews. And I want to say this is where we're starting today. It's not just starting today. It's been happening. There have been some who have been laboring for years for this. But again, I'll say that I don't know if we've ever seen an authentic unity between Christians and Jews in history. And I think if we're ever going to see one, like, now is the time. Now is the time where we need to stand together. Now is the time where we need to think about what are some real ways we can change the narrative, have places where we can have discussion and conversation, where people can actually think and begin to see things for what they really are. Because as we all know, as people of faith here, this is not just a political thing. This is a spiritual battle that we're talking about around the heart of what I would call the spiritual heart of our world, which is the promised land, which is Israel. I want to know, Max, what would you encourage us as a Christian community and other allies who are here in the room? What are some things that we could practically do to combat anti-Semitism? What are some things that you would encourage and that would be helpful and not harmful? Because a lot of times we try to help as Christians, and maybe it doesn't. It's more harmful than helpful. What are some practical things that we could be looking to do as we leave here today?
Well, first of all, look, anything that you do is helpful and not hurtful in this realm. And we're in a house of worship. I don't mean to preach at y'all, but in my faith,
Preach. You have permission. You're on the platform, brother. Preach.
In my faith, we say that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. And so I think it's so important.
That's good.
For all of us to contribute in whatever small way, with whatever small level of commitment, whatever you think you can do, to do. Because we all have to contribute to the completion of this great task of combating anti-Semitism, of making this holy alliance between our two wonderful communities. And so in terms of practical steps, for those of you who are on social media, I mean, social media, like I said, is ground zero for this hate. So, share videos, share things that you see that resonate with you, that you think your friends who might not be as well informed as you are, who haven't had the chance to read or to learn, might benefit from understanding. And I think that the other thing would be just to share when you hear, if you're having conversations and you hear people who are saying things that you know are just patently untrue. When you hear people say Israel is an apartheid state, I mean, if you travel to Israel, you can see all of these different religions and communities are living in harmony.
All together.
Pastor
In
George
Jerusalem.
has seen it himself.
Yeah, I think that was, I'll say this for those who are looking for a little bit more encouragement to go to Israel. One of the most powerful things that I walked away with, not just my experience and connection with God, but feeling more empowered in conversations when I would hear people say things like, oh, Israel is slaughtering people in Palestine, and this defamation of the Jewish people. I felt much more equipped and much more empowered in those conversations, having spoken with the stakeholders there, having spoken with not just Jews, but Christians and Muslims who are living in Israel together. You'll feel much more equipped for those conversations in a sympathetic way, in an empathetic way, and to help people see that it's not the picture that the news is painting. All of us know you can't really trust the news right now. You just can't. You have to read between the lines. You have to see what this one's saying, see what that one's saying, and pull it together. And thank God we have the Spirit of truth. All right, who said, I'll lead you into all truth. He'll help us to know what's real and what's not. But here we are, and Max can testify. I'm sure anyone who's been to Israel can testify. So much of what's going on in this narrative is it's just meant to spin, and it's meant to perpetuate this lie that Satan has done for thousands of years to destroy God's chosen people. That's simply what it is, and we don't again want to have it happen unchallenged. I would say this, all right, I'm going to put us to the task. How many of us have social media? Just raise your hand. You got Facebook, you got Instagram. Look at that. I'm going to encourage you today. We have a post on our Instagram. I think it's on our Facebook as well, about Solidarity Sunday and about standing with Israel. I want to encourage you to do a post today saying you stand with Israel. We can shift the algorithm on Instagram. We can shift the algorithm online. And as that could be even just one of the things that opens up conversation. You'll be surprised at how many people might reach out to you because you're making a stance on this issue where many are afraid to. And if who's got enough courage to actually get on camera on your social media? We got a few people here. See, I know your post, so do the first part. Start small. Do the first part. Do a post, but if you're feeling the courage, and you could even pray and ask the Lord to put a strong word in your mouth to say, here's why I support Israel. Here's why I stand with the Jewish people in their time of need. And that could be a simple, easy, affordable, powerful act that you can do right now to begin to stand in this battle that we're seeing happening right now. Max, any last words of encouragement, words of wisdom? Can you run that back? That one thing you said. You said they say at your synagogue. What they say?
Yeah, in our faith, they say, no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. And you need not preach the same faith. You need not to share the same values. You need not preach the same faith to build this strong alliance that we're building right now. And you need not preach the same faith to make friends with those on other faiths, with other faiths. And So I am so grateful to you for putting together this event, for being a part of these awesome organizations, for bringing together this incredible community. And I want to be very clear that this should be a reciprocal alliance. This will be a reciprocal friendship.
Amen.
Between the Jewish community and your community, and between locally and more broadly. And I hope that this is the beginning of a long relationship and friendship in this Commonwealth and in New Jersey and in the local area, so that we can all continue to come together and make a difference.
Amen. Come on, can we give Max a hand?
These stories, these testimonies are overwhelming. It's amazing to hear the strength, the perseverance, the resilience of the Jewish people. I want to invite you to join me and come alongside our covenantal older brother in faith, the Jewish community. You can do that by going to eagleswings.org and becoming a partner today. You can plant a tree in Israel in our forest of life, an amazing, amazing forest that literally the desert is blossoming as the rose. You can feed hungry Israeli families through our Abraham's Bread feeding program. There's so many different ways for you to be involved, but let me hear from you today. Make your best gift today and ask your church to be involved in next year's Solidarity Sunday. All of the information is there in the link. We are believing that hundreds and hundreds of churches are going to join together every year and understand that never again is now, and we have to be a part of that solution. I look forward for your prayers, your giving, your partnership, making a difference in this generation. Solidarity Sunday, be a part of it.